All right, everyone. Again, thank you for coming. My name is Gary Diorsi, Director of Development here at Northeast Family Services. We serve Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and New York. Uh, this is our monthly webinar series, and today we have Kyle Tomlinson speaking on helping children manage big emotions with co-regulation. Kyle is a family therapist with a passion for supporting young youth mental health, fostering behavioral changes, and promoting therapeutic skill building. Since 2018, Kyle has provided community-based services to youth families, culminating in obtaining his Master's of Social Work in 2024. Um, Before I have Kyle jump on, just a couple of notes. If you have questions you can ask anytime during the presentation. The chat is disabled. You need to use the Q&A button. Type that in and they are monitored all the time. With that, Kyle, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, Gary, for the introduction, and thanks for having me. So we're going to be doing the presentation today on, as Gary said, supporting children through big emotions. So the objectives and the topics we're going to cover today, we have three. Why children have difficulty managing their big emotions, the foundations of co-regulation, and practical co-regulation techniques. So the third part of this, I think, is going to be the most helpful and will be the most robust. That's going to be the biggest section. I just want to point out that when I'm going to be mentioning children a lot, that line children, but I really mean children, young teens, teenagers, really any non-adult is that's covering. So in my roles, I typically have worked with kids ages about 7 to 18. So that's my experience. Also, the on here will be caregivers. Frequently throughout this, really, when I mean caregivers, it could be caregivers, it could just be adults that are supporting children. A little bit about me. Gary gave a good introduction, but yeah, so I have my LCSW. I graduated social work from Bridgewater, and I've been working with youth and families in different roles. So therapeutic mentoring is a one-on-one role where you take children out in the community and work on skill building. And now I'm a family therapist, and I just started doing behavioral services as well. Before we really get in, three key terms you need to know is dysregulation, which is difficulty managing emotions, thoughts, behavior in a healthy manner. Self-regulation, the process by which people manage their own emotions, thoughts, behaviors. And the important one today is co-regulation, interactive process where a calm person helps another person regulate through their emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in a healthy way. So the first objective, helping children with big emotions and difficulty regulating. What does that even look like? What does it look like for a child who is emotionally dysregulated? So here's nine, but of course there are more. There's a variety here. We'll cover them real quick. So big emotions that don't match the situations. I see that one so often in my work where maybe there's a small problem, but a child is reacting in a big way. Dramatic mood swings from one extreme to the other. This is where maybe a caregiver will explain, oh, the child goes from 0 to 60 so quick. I don't know where that came from. Difficulty naming their emotions they're experiencing, which is something that we're going to cover pretty in depth today. Um, Excessive crying, whining, maybe uncontrollably. Aggression is a big one. That is one of the big signs for emotional dysregulation. So aggression, verbal aggression, physical aggression, snapping, irritability. And then some maybe different ones that are expected, like difficulty making decisions, getting stuck on worries and can't think of anything else. And impulse control is another sign. And it's interesting because I'd say the bottom left and the bottom right are kind of opposites. Difficulty making decisions is like really slow decisions, and impulse control is, of course, making decisions too quickly. So it's just kind of see like that the behaviors in a child can look different ways. I might go to a home where three different children and they're all dysregulated, and maybe one is really impulsive and breaking things in the home by accident. There's another one that's being aggressive, and there's another one that's just shutting down. So it's really all dependent on the child. So dysregulated from what? What big emotions are we talking about? Typically, I see if we kind of look at the fan on the right side of this wheel of emotions, typically it's from the bad, fearful or angry fan. and so common to have difficulty with feeling stressed, overwhelmed, anxious, frustrated, mad, or upset. Of course, there can be other ones. Like I don't think a child would have a hard time managing the happy fan most likely, but of course, the ones in the sad fans as well, like grief or feeling embarrassed. Um, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, is that it's kind of important to know just how big this wheel is. There's so many different emotions that's going to come up throughout this webinar. It's really interesting, and if you have time in the week and think about it, when you're talking to an adult you're familiar with, a partner or a friend, try this. Try to ask them, how many emotions did you feel in the last week? And I bet you there's somewhere they're going to list somewhere between 4 to 8, because even adults aren't really in tune with what we're feeling. So that 4 to 8 is maybe surface level ones. And maybe the adult actually fell 10, 15, 20 throughout the week. Of course, there's lots of them on this wheel, right? So especially for a child, they're really only going to list the big pieces of the pie here, the happy, sad, bad. Really skill building with them is going to be important throughout this presentation. Another half of the a trigger could be sensory triggers. Some kids are more susceptible to light, sounds, touches. All right, so why is it difficult for kids to regulate? There's really two main reasons. Their brain is not fully developed. The prefrontal cortex, which handles reasoning, calming, is not fully formed until the mid-20s. And really big one throughout this presentation is going to be that self-regulation is a learned skill. It's just a learned skill that requires years of practice, guidance, and maturity. So really, a young child who hasn't built the skills is going to turn into, an elementary schooler who doesn't know these skills, to a high schooler, to an adult, and then, maybe a parent that doesn't have regulation skills and can't help co-regulate their own child. So really, it is learned skill, and the age doesn't necessarily matter. Um, some children are just more susceptible to having difficulty regulating than others. There's a couple of reasons biologically. Um, some children have more difficult with managing their emotions, the more emotionally reactive, have a greater difficulty self-soothing, and some have high levels of sensory dysregulation. Environmental factors is a big one. Kids with trauma, stress, especially daily stress, fatigue, changes in routines or transitions might have more difficulty regulating than others. I see that so often in my work. Just an example of the changes in the routine is I work with a child he was in elementary school. He has more biological factors, and he's could be a pretty emotional child. But he was doing quite well in school, regulated. And th this school year, there was 3 changes with his teachers. A teacher left for maternity leave, and then another teacher left. So just that change really set him off, and he was dysregulated throughout the school year until that the final teacher has really settled in now for 3 or 4 months. But just that one thing, the change in the routine, was really threw him off, and it was hard for to be just hard to be regulated. So really for anybody, regulation is hard, especially for children. But children, in order to self-regulate, they must know. Well, they must have emotional intelligence. We kind of talked about being able to identify a list of emotions, and they can only maybe their emotional intelligence is not that high, and they can only list 5 or 6 emotions. They need to be able to tell what emotions look like or what they feel like, especially in their own bodies. So understanding sort of some of the triggers, the warning signs, especially the warning signs. So maybe they have butterflies in their stomach, their fists are clenched, their leg is bouncing. What does this mean? These are little warning signs from the body. Hey, you're feeling a strong emotion right now. Um, Without the ability to be able to identify that, first be like a self-awareness to see that, and then, hey, this means butterflies and stomach means anxiety. Um, a child must be able to know that. And then once they understand what they're feeling, they need to know what coping skill to use and be able to communicate their feelings or their actions to really to get help from adults or even just to communicate what they're feeling. Even that last part is hard. They might be trying to regulate. So I was working with a teenager who was having a really hard time regulating almost daily in school. And his plan was to take space. So he did a pretty good job of understanding how he was feeling stressed or overwhelmed. He knew a good list of coping skills. His coping skill was to take space, maybe go to the school adjustment counselor or go to the bathroom to splash some water on his face for a break, get away from the situation. But his communication skills were lacking. So he would pretty much just get out of the chair and just go. And the school staff didn't know what he was doing. They were fearful he was going to leave the building. So the communication is a big part of a skill that they must have as well. Common myths. We'll go over five. Myth one, children should always be calm. That's a myth. The fact is, a child experiencing a wide range of emotions is healthy. That's part of their development. They should be doing that. When children express big feelings, their brains are actively practicing the foundations of self-regulation. So a child should not always be calm. It's okay for them to have strong emotions from, some of the ones that we were listing earlier. Myth number two, ignoring tantrums teaches discipline. There's some truth in planned ignoring, of course, but where this can be helpful to not ignore and to support the child is when an adult notices and responds to a child's feelings, it helps the child calm their own system in their brain. It makes them feel safe and supported. And over time, this helps the child learn how to manage their feelings on their own. Really, this is about connection. So the child is, just ignoring, misses the opportunity for the caregiver or adult to form a connection with the child, and to help them through that regulation process. Um, a distraction coping skill is the best way to help. That can for sure help in the moment. Maybe something like journaling, a video game, art, all great things, and they can help bring down the tension in that moment. But it's important for children to be more moving towards learning the full cycle. This helps their brain understand and calm down instead of just pushing the emotions to the side. So this is really important for the child to that whole, feeling the emotion. What am I feeling? And being able to work through that, especially with a caregiver. But if it's just a distraction every time, um, they're just going to learn to just keep pushing the emotions away and never go through that whole process and process what they're feeling. Myth number four, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but that children should be able to control their emotions by a certain age. Heard age 5, but just by any age. Um, as we talked about, that the brain continues to develop through adolescence, even through adulthood. And of course, emotional regulation is a learned skill. That's such a big piece of today, the webinar today. So if the skill is not obtained, a child will continue to have difficulty regardless of the age. So really the age doesn't matter. It's the skill attainment and the support. And the final myth is that willpower is just enough. Self-regulation is not about effort or about the amount of discipline. It is linked to brain development, as we said, to environment or support, skill building, and it's not just sure determination. This shows up in ways that I hear in my work where adults are saying, after the fact, when a child is calm, they say something like, I don't know why I did that, because they truly want to make the right choices. They don't want to be aggressive or yell or they want to make a good choice, but maybe they don't have the skills, they didn't have the support in that moment.
Kyle, I have a question for you.
But yeah,
During a tantrum, a child is not able to listen, talk, function. So how else to support them?
great question. In the third part, we're going to have a perfect answer for that. So in the third section, we're going to have um, a section on what to do for caregivers before the moment, during, and after. Um, a big part, so that'll definitely come up. It's a little preview is during the tantrum is not a good time to. There's still work to be done, but the work is really before the moment. A really good slide for that. It's kind of like a balloon popping. Like once the balloon pops, then that's the tantrum. it's kind of too late. The balloon can't be put back together. Um, so we'll get there. Really good visual for it. Thank you for the question. And just some things I've heard in my work, some misconceptions or just some statements that I've heard from maybe parents or caregivers that maybe aren't helpful. Well, they don't have any trauma, so why are they having these tantrums or big behaviors? We talked about that any child is going to have a difficulty with this, especially if they do have trauma. But even if they don't, they should know better, or they're already XYZ years old. They just don't care. We talked about they should be able to do it themselves. That's the goal eventually, but maybe they're just not there yet. Or maybe they have fidgets or they have art or coloring books, but they just don't use them in the moment. That's going to be part of the planning that we do later on in this webinar. And just the line, they just need to calm down is just not a helpful line. And we'll look at like a little metaphor for that in a second, which is right now. So we're going to take just a minute and put our creative hats on, and try to think about this in a fun way. So what is it like to ask a child to just calm down without having, they're not fully developed brain, they don't have the skills, they don't have a plan yet, and they haven't practiced this. So what's it like to ask this child to be able to do that? It's sort of an impossible journey. It's like asking a child to travel from one side of the emotion galaxy to the other. So just in this fun example, and I'll do this in my work where I'll when I'm working with kids to increase their emotional identification and intelligence, we'll look a lot on what emotions look like, what do they feel like, and sometimes we'll do art activities where they actually make emotion planets. So for this one, the frustration is it's a big storm, maybe it's hot there. Um, so if they don't have the skills, they're not sure which planet they're actually on. So they're frustrated and they're not able to identify that because maybe they don't even know the word frustrated. All they know is angry. They can't recognize their own signs in their body. Maybe the twitching, maybe the hands are clenched. Maybe they don't see that yet. They don't know where they should be, so they're frustrated. What should they be trying to get to? Like planet calm. How to pilot the ship? That would be like how to get there. What's the coping skills? What's the plan to get there? So having path or having guidance, and then how to ask for help if they get lost along the way, because it is a big journey. It's a big ask to go from frustrated to calm. So really, it's like an impossible journey asking a child without the right skills and guidance to do this. The second part is, all right, we'll talk about the foundations of co-regulation. This is probably the shorter section, and then the largest is going to be the practical skills. Co-regulation in one phrase, sharing the calm. It really is that interactive process where, in this case, an adult, but I guess it could be anybody, but an adult is sharing their own calm. So getting a place to regulation and sharing that with a child. Just a good quote from a neuroscientist on this subject. As you co-regulate with someone, the mirror neurons in their brains are activated. This enables the person in the dysregulated state to literally mirror your calmness. So the child will mirror if you're able to stay calm. This is, of course, easier said than done. And it's not just going to be a finger snapped, but this is part of the process and this will help. So that mirroring is so important because children don't just learn through words. They attune to caregivers' emotional states, and their nervous systems are wired to sync with their caregivers. Um, that is because caregivers are really the powerhouse of this. They are the leaders, they set the tempo, and they lead the children. So when a caregiver or adult is overwhelmed, it escalates the stress for everyone and prevents the situation from resolving peacefully. If a caregiver is regulated and remains calm, the children can mirror and they can regulate themselves. For the visual learner, what this looks like, essentially a regulated child, a dysregulated child will likely be a regulated child. But if the adult is dysregulated, then the child cannot be. They would for sure be dysregulated. It all starts with the caregiver or with the adult. Three reasons why co-regulation is so important. Co-regulation helps kids and teens feel calm, help them to problem solve, make better choices. Co-regulation is a bridge to help strengthen self-regulation skills over time. So this one is really important that the intention is that co-regulation is not forever. It's helping them learn these skills and then eventually getting to a place where they're able to self-regulate. And co-regulation strengthens relationships, as we talked about with the connection, and it reminds kids that they're cared about, they are safe. Just a little quote for this. When little people are overwhelmed by big emotions, it's our job to share the calm, not join the chaos, which I thought that was such a great quote. So, to share the calm, not join the chaos. And as it just kind of said that co-regulation is just for now. Independence is the goal and self-regulation is the future. So this phrase, do for, do with, cheer on, common phrase in therapy, one I often use with caregivers. Um, Essentially, you're always trying to get to the cheer on, especially with working with children. So you might have to do for now. If a child can't regulate, it is doing the doing for. We're going to talk about what that looks like in a second. Um, but the goal is to cheer on. So I've heard from a lot of parents too as well. They should just be able to do this. This is one of the common misconceptions, right? Like they should be able to do it themselves. If they're not there, they're not there. They need the help. Maybe they need you to make the choice for them, and that's the do for. But eventually, the goal is to do it with them, where maybe they would make a choice between taking space in their room or listening to music. That's the do for piece you're trying to move to, where eventually they are able to identify what they feel. They pick their own coping skill and they execute it. So they're, hey, I'm feeling upset. Maybe it's at you, at the caregiver. I'm feeling upset. I'm gonna go take space in my room. Maybe they come home from school and it was a bad day at school. They walk through the door and I'm just so stressed from the day and I just need to go take a shower to relax. That's the cheer on. That's the goal of self-regulation. Probably the most practical, most important part of this presentation is the practical techniques. So there's three real parts of this that kind of merge together. Providing a warm, responsive relationship, which we've talked about a bit. Um, from the caregiver, we're going to talk about that in a second, but it's really the approach is so huge. We're going to talk about structuring the environment and also teaching self-regulation and coping skills, which we talked about. But it's really these three mixed together, and these are kind of the three pillars. So one of the questions so far was about tantrums, what to do in the moment. So some of this is like the before the moment, which we're going to talk about in a second, is so important for that situation. Here it is, before the moment. We're going to talk about each one of these next ones individually on our own slide. But just here's a couple here. So this is really, we're going to look at it in three sections. Before the moment or the tantrum in this case. So before the tantrum, during, and after. And this could be tantrums, it could be shutting down. And we looked at it could be, any type of emotion, but the before the work. Um, so this work is a must. Like this is absolutely important. It's not just the during the tantrum work. That's so important to just maintain safety and to, de-escalate the situation. But this might be one of the most important parts of the work, the before. Um, if we're thinking about the galaxy of emotions that we're looking at a little bit before, this is how to pilot the ship or, what coping skill to do. It's the path to get to calm. It's the pre-work, like the planning work. It's so important because if you get to the moment, the dysregulation moment, and the plan hasn't been set and the routine's not set, then it's going to be really hard to do the work in the moment. So before the moment, structure the environment, help with the skills we talked about, emotion identification skills and intelligence skills, increase the communication skills, the expression, coping skills, have a plan. So for structure is important. This can help kids feel regulated. Often I'll use this in my own work in both family therapy and behavioral work roles. So using consistent times for meals, play, homework, chores hygiene, sleep, really, really important. So actually, one of the activities I'll do is come up with different like to-do lists for a morning routine and a night after school routine. Things like brushing teeth, waking up, getting the backpack ready, getting dressed, and having the family organize that in the way that makes sense. Just there's work that could be done in morning schedules sometimes. So I have one family who's always dysregulated in the morning. There's three kids. The older of the kids leaves a little bit earlier than the other two, and that kid is constantly late because the family's dysregulated and just not ready to leave. They've needed help just organizing their morning. And for the afternoon schedule is just as important, especially for hygiene. A lot of kids don't want to take hygiene. So having a plan for that already. And then having transition rituals is can be important too. This can kind of you can kind of get creative with this. But first, have the same routine for transitions to school, to parents' home. What I mean by that is maybe if parents are separated, so that transition can be really hard for a lot of kids and parents too, to and from the transition. And prepare children for changing as much as you can, changing activities. Um, in far advance is so it might be something as simple as hey, we're going to the dentist when you come home. So don't surprise them with that when they walk through the door that day. It's, getting ahead of that. And also using a timer to help move smoothly from one task to the next or um, to a non-preferred activity from a preferred activity. Um, so the couple things on this is to um, be flexible. So for something I mentioned, the hygiene is important and comes up a lot with the families I work with the kids just like refusing to engage in the hygiene. Be flexible. Like every body is different. Some people might want to, take that take the shower in the morning or when they get home. Some kids want to do the homework as soon as they walk through the door. Some need the decompression time. Um, Even meals like breakfast can be kids are so different. Everybody's can be so different. Like for me, I personally need a big breakfast in the morning or I just cannot function. Some of my partner I was just working with yesterday in a home, exact opposite. She eats a big breakfast, she's not able to function. So being flexible with this as a caregiver, on timers. Those are can be so important, especially for oppositional kids who have a hard time moving to a non-preferred activity or off of a preferred activity. So something like video games. Say a caregiver wants them to go from video games to homework. First of all, that will go back up to the daily structure. That's probably not the best plan, is to have the play before the homework, like just organizing that would be helpful. But the timer would be really helpful in moving off of a preferred activity. So like a 10-minute timer with where the child is the one that presses the actual timer, the go on the timer on the phone, and the caregiver would give prompts at maybe 5 minutes and then 2 minutes. And that can really help with the transitions. Um, just one little piece on the transition rituals itself. I had one family I was working with that there was always dysregulation going from the separated parents, so from one home to the other. That actual transition from the home to the other one was really dysregulating. So we came up with a ritual um, of using a coping skill, checking the bags that they would bring to make sure that the clothes and items that they brought from one house to another. Um, and we wanted to come up with a name for that just to have it something fun. So the children in the home came up with Camp Calm Down. That was their name. So little Camp Calm Down. So they would kind of have like a little powwow in the living room before transitioning from one home to the next. They'd put all their backpacks, they have everything that they needed, um, and they would just use a coping skill together or play a game together, and that helped with the transitions. Um, Second piece of this before work is we talked about this, the emotional identification, really beefing up the skills of the child for the emotional intelligence, understanding what emotion that they're feeling, having a really good list. So it's not just the big pieces of the pie the happy, surprised, bad. I really often see, especially with the younger kiddos. I had a 8-year-old that I was working with that every week I'd have him tell me just one emotion that a positive emotion and one sort of difficult emotion that he felt in the week. For the first month, every single time it was he felt happy, he felt mad every time because he just didn't have the skills to really go beyond that. He only maybe knew 4 or 5 emotions. Working on that was big. So maybe he meant something in the happy fan. Maybe he meant that he was proud of something that he did at school, but he said he was happy about it. So he just wasn't totally accurate to how he was feeling. Um, or maybe for angry, he actually felt jealous and he's just, he's saying something happened at school, he felt angry, or he knew an answer in class and he put his hand up and the teacher didn't call on him. And he's saying he felt angry, but maybe he felt disrespected. So by the time I worked with this child for a year, by the end, I mean, he was able to really get 3 levels down on this fan here, where he's really saying exactly what he felt. Put Inside Out here because that's like the great movie for this. Even just the looks of this, like I think most people would say that if you ask them what color angry is, I think everybody would say red, right? Everybody would say blue is sad. Sad as blue. Some of these are maybe not as we'd have disagreements, but like it's up to the child how they feel. So I'll usually make a giant list. I'll print out a list in black and white of emotions. And this is one of the first activities on this. Have them take coloring pencils and just highlight which what they feel like what emotion is what color. So angry is still going to be red, but when you get to the other ones, just helping them visualize this. So you want them to get really good at this so that they know what emotion looks like. And then start you can go off of that. Oh, what does an emotion feel like in the body? The moving your leg, like tapping your leg, is that anxious? Is that frustrated? All of this work, pre-work before the tantrum helps. All right, what am I feeling? What are the warning signs, which we're going to talk about in a second. Expression or communication skills, I feel, is such a classic therapy thing for a reason. Helps children just get practice this and get really good at this. So just I feel this emotion. That's why I had that client list this every week. I feel angry. So this one is even better. I'm gonna start using this one I found. I feel because and what I need is. So we talked about the eventual goal is self-regulation, do this by themselves. So eventually you want them to get to the place where I feel frustrated because of something you said. What I need to do is take space in my room. All right, that's great. And then that's, cheer them on. But practicing this beforehand because in the moment it's kind of too late. They don't have the skills. And then coping skills, so important to have create a preferred list of coping skills with the child and having coping skills ready. We'll talk about a couple more in a second. Um, but having a big list of coping skills for their toolbox. One, I'll usually joke with kids I work with. Well, let's go to the next one. I'll say that in a second. So also mirroring a school's common corner just to have these coping skills ready. So if there's a kid that wants to use fidgets, wants to use journaling, that really helps. Say they're not ready. Where is the fidgets? Like that happens so often that I've seen in a home. Where is the journal? So getting upset the tantrum's coming. We're about to hit tantrum. All right, well we know that journaling works or fidgets works. Go find it. Uh, it's misplaced. We're not ready for it. So having the plan before. Most schools have a common corner now with books and fidgets and beanbag chairs. So mirroring that'll also help in school too, because you're on the same page with what the school's doing. This is where I was going to give a little example that have different coping skills ready for different locations. And I don't mean different locations in the house. I just mean, school, home, if there's a sport, grocery store, in the car, having a plan. So what I'll joke with clients is I'll tell them 3 of my favorite coping skills for me is going for a walk, riding my bike, and playing basketball. And I'll ask them, are those good coping skills? And they'll say yes, because they are. And then I say, what if I'm in school? Which one of those can I do? And maybe go for a walk, but the can't bike, can't basketball. What if I'm driving in the car? Can't do any of those. So I need more. And I need ones that can be ready for any situation. So that's why the classic deep breaths is so universal because that can be done anywhere, at the desk when they're in school, um, in the car, in the grocery store, in the home, anywhere. So different coping skills matching the locations is really important. All right, the in the moment work. We were Part of the question was about this. I think this will help with that tantrum question is see triggers as they happen and recognize the warning signs. I have a couple good visuals for that in a second. Regulate the adult needs to regulate themselves. There's no only way to co-regulate, sharing the calm, and then prompt the child. This is one of the ones I was talking about. So there is eventually a point of no return, and intervention before the point is key. So on this example, the zone 5 or out of control is the full-blown tantrum. At this point, it's just maintaining safety. It's making sure that holes aren't in the walls, that things aren't broken, um, the child's not running away from the home or the location. So in that situation, the work needed to be done before. And of course, we said earlier that this can be from 0 to 60, so it's easier said than done, but this is really where the intervention needs to happen, is in this situation, zone 2, 3, and maybe 4, but even then it's a little difficult. So just the examples, the body cues for this, which is where the emotional identification is so important. The body cues in this one are frowning, arm crossed, and then zone 3 is heart beating faster. So a child can recognize that, but the clenched fist is maybe the adult around them would recognize. And then it just keeps going from there. But if the child can learn, it's really both ways. If the self-regulation is the child learns my heart is beating fast, I'm feeling hot. And then the adult can also notice the clenched fist. So working on two fronts, both the child and the adult are both seeing this, and then the intervention can happen. The balloon example from earlier, this one is for sensory dysregulation, but it's just as a good example about that balloon popping and the intervention needing to be done before the balloon pops. It's too late. So in this one, at first the child is regulated, and then just something happens. There's bright lights in the cafeteria. Another thing happens, and the balloon just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Itchy socks, bright lights, sitting too long. This could be, a little frustration happens. They didn't like what something was said. They felt disrespected. Either way, the balloon is growing, growing, growing. The pop is the full-blown tantrum, and the work has to be done before then because then the balloons pop. So as the adult or caregiver, um, it's really focusing on what's in your control. The approach is the place to start and so huge. Remember it's the sharing the calm. So the steps for this is at the bottom. So this kind of looks like it's for children, but I think this is even more important for the caregivers helping the co-regulation. So on the bottom, it's pausing, taking a second for the adult, maybe taking a breath, and then focusing on just the middle circle. So what's in the control? Um, so in the adult's control is their words, their actions, their breathing and choices. So that's the place to keep going back to. What can they influence? Well, they can have a good tone of voice, at least to start with. And if it gets into the what's in your control or the tantrum is happening, where say a child is making rude comments to the adult, and it's hard to stay regulated. Well, that's frustrating. I want to respond, going back to what's in my control again. All right, my words, my actions, taking a breath. And each time that happens, because it's not just going to be a flip of a switch, going back to what's in my control. And I'm sure if you can hear my cat, but the cat's in my office today, so we have a little extra guest. Getting calm to share the calm. So I wanted to just take a look at the different body languages here. The approach is just so huge. And I mean, it's pretty obvious in these two examples, but just I think one thing that maybe is not as obvious in the first look is who is approaching who or who has control. So in the one to the left, the child is literally backed into a corner. He's the one that's sitting, and there's nowhere for the child to go. There's not much that's in the child's control here. The right side, the adult's the one that's sitting. And just look how much space the child has in the right side that they could go. So if they needed to, they're getting aggravated with the adult. They could take a second. They could walk off a couple paces. They could come back. That's kind of in their control. Um, the adult looks like they're in control too, but they're letting the child have some control, and they're the one that's sitting in this example. This one's really important. I'll share this with parents that I work with and caregivers. We'll go back to these six really, really frequently. So strategies to use with kids and teens. Staying calm in times of stress. We've talked about that. The importance of that is, sharing the calm. Um, Being present is so important because if an adult or caregiver is not present, then they're going to miss those warning signs. The balloon inflating, the thermometer rising up. They're going to miss the signs and miss the signs, and it's too late. So being present is just so important to be able to see those signs. And I know like a lot of this is easier said than done because there's multiple kids in the home. Maybe the adult is maybe a single parent, maybe they're cooking dinner at the same time, and it's hard to recognize this, but it's important to know, I think, that the work a caregiver does upfront helps long term. So it actually helps, like we said, like helps build the self-regulation. So if a child can learn that, they have that with them, and then it just gets easier for the whole family, or the child moving forward. Um, so using supportive words. Do you remember what we worked on? Do you remember what we planned? You got this. And at least using neutral words to the approach is so huge. Limit the language is really, really important. So it's just using enough language to help in that moment and help the child calm down. Just that and no more. That one's, I think, is a really hard one for a lot of adults. Might want to go over explain something, might want to go back to something that had been done weeks ago. That one's really tough. Gary, was there a question?
There is a question, Kyle. In your
Okay.
experience, how effective is this with kids who are blackout angry?
Yeah, this is the work that needs to be done. Absolutely. This is what I would do with that child. Um, the- that is going back to the couple examples. That's the zone five or the full blown. Um, that child I'm assuming probably goes really quickly from 0 to 10 for their anger. Um, Having the before work and the during work is going to be so important. This is exactly the work to be done with that type of child, regardless of their age or this is exactly what to work with them on. Um, Something the perfect time to ask that question because the modeling the coping skills, coping strategies is one thing I'd like have a caregiver go to in that moment. So as soon as they notice that a child is blackout angry or getting there or maybe shut down, whatever their dysregulation is, the adult doing the coping skill will help. So I would recommend, let's just say the child likes to do art. I have a family with a whole everybody, they're all great artists. Um, Having the artwork ready was important. And what the mom would do is, as soon as there was going to be dysregulation, she would sit down at the kitchen table, pull out the coloring notebook, and she would just start coloring. And she would prompt from there. So it's kind of like the picture on the right that we just looked at is the adult is sitting, the adult's letting the child have some control coming to them. The adult is modeling, hey, here's what you should do. Here's and without saying much either, right? With limited language, if the adult just sits down and starts coloring, nothing even needed to be said. It was just modeling. And then inviting the child to do the coping skill. So this example, mom would sit down at the table, grab the coloring books, start coloring. First, would try not to even say anything, see if they would come to color with them. If not, invite them to come over. Likely they wouldn't in the beginning, but mom would keep going back to the top left, staying calm in times of stress, keep using the supportive words, and eventually the child was able to at least sit next to them, color, and maybe not say anything at all. And that was what was helpful for this family. And they just kept doing that, and eventually they would process through. Couple slides of what not to do and what to do. What not to do. We talked about this. Using frustration or yelling, it just overwhelms them. Give multiple step directions. They're too hard to process. So maybe two, three at max options. Um, force them to use a coping skill. So even if they agree to this, planning before, this is where flexibility is so important. I had a couple parents that were getting like really good at this planning, but then in the moment, the child wanted to do something different that was not planned, and they were like, "No, we have this plan. We have to stick to it." The grip was a little too firm. Just got to be flexible because they were advocating for what they needed. So exactly that, sticking too closely to the plan. Or this is kind of an important one that threatening punishments too quickly, like consequences are important for sure. But you want them to win, you want them to succeed. So giving them a couple options, like opportunities to work through this and self-regulate is the goal. So you don't want to right away, oh, you're going to lose that. You're going to lose your tablet. You're going to go to bed earlier. Not right away. If it needs to get there, that's fine. But try to regulate first. What to do? Get prepared to respond, like we said, check in with yourself. What's in my control? Positive language, role model a coping skill, like we said, sit down, get your body, check in with your body, um, maybe get on their level, role model a coping skill. As much as you can, give them some sense of control because they likely feel like they don't have it. And maybe offer two clear choices. I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna color. You can join me if you want. Or we can get your headphones, you can listen to music in your room. Two clear choices, both good choices. Let them do either. Bring up punishments eventually, punishments, consequences after maybe three prompts, but you don't want to get in a power struggle. Usually after three prompts is you're just getting back and forth and it just gets into a power struggle. But again, you want them to win. The goal is for them to make the good choice, regulate, and go through this cycle. The after the work moment, give praise if it's earned. Um, Give a consequence if it's earned. So that's still important. If the plan was if, after three prompts, you say that the caregiver says you lose this, if they're able to regulate, you have to stick to your word. Give the consequence if it is earned. When ready, review what went right. It's not going to be in the moment for sure. It won't be then. But when it's calmed down, maybe not too far, not next week. Hopefully not the next day. Like maybe later on in that night, review went right. Oh, even if it's just one thing, they were able to say what they felt, but then they weren't able to regulate from there. They said that they felt angry. All right, highlight that. Oh, you told me you felt angry. That's good. That's a really good start, and you're gonna keep working off that. Or if they're able to take space or use a coping skill, highlight what went right and review what could go better next time and keep making a strong plan. All right, to wrap up back to our planets and emotion galaxy example, taking a quick second, put the creative hat on. What is it like when a child does have the right skills, the plan, the practice, and a supportive co-regulating adult in their lives, helping them through this? It's still difficult, but it's possible. So traveling from one side of the galaxy to the other of emotions is a long, difficult journey, but they can get there if they know which planet they're on. And if they have that list prepared already mentally, they know a whole list of emotions. They're able to notice the signs in their bodies, or maybe they have someone tell them, point them out, hey, looks like your hands are your fists are clenched. Looks like you're pacing around. Um, if they know which planet they should be going to, all right, well, the goal is to go to calm, and they know what that would feel like, what that would look like and feel like. If they know how to pilot the ship, what coping skill they should be using. All right, when I'm angry, I should what their coping skill is. And maybe they have different coping skills for what they're feeling. If they're anxious, they use certain coping skills, and frustrated, they use others. So they know coping skills, they know how to pilot their ship. They'll know the path to get there because there's a clear plan. Okay, well, next time that you feel frustrated, what we're going to do is we already have that um, calming corner we set up, just like your school. And so next time you're frustrated, either the caregiver or the child, we're gonna say, okay, it looks like you're frustrated, and you're gonna just go over to the table and use your art. Or you're gonna grab your headphones, listen to that playlist that you made for when you're angry, and take space in your room and just lay there. So having the plan. and asking for help if they get lost, or at least communicating how they feel. With those skills, it's still difficult, but it is possible. And it helps to have a co-pilot on your journey, of course, and that's the caregiver or the adult. So caregivers are the most powerful tool in the parenting toolbox. Calm, regulated adult providing co-regulation is more powerful than any tip, trick, or strategy, anything that we've listed. The co-regulated calm adult is most important. Some of the key takeaways for today: managing big emotions can be difficult for children, but it's a normal part of development. It's very normal. Self-regulation is a learn and long process. Of course, co-regulation is the goal, but self-regulation is difficult. And co-regulation or sharing the calm is the bridge to help children be able to co-regulate in the future when they're able to, but they might need help for now. Really appreciate it and want to open it up for questions.
Thank you all. The recording of this presentation will be on the Northeast Family Services YouTube channel. And if you would like a copy of the slides, send me an email, gdorsi@nefamily.com. We have a couple of questions, I think. Oh,
Sure.
no, it's about sharing. What would you find most rewarding about working with children, Kyle?
Oh, thanks for the question. I think I really like skill building. I could tell by this webinar. Um, for me, that's really rewarding because that is something that a child can take with them in their life, no matter the situation. So when they're, a teenager or adult, they're always going to have that. Um, so the programs that I've worked with are shorter term. They're like about a year. And the reason I like that is because it's not, helping with each problem of the week. It's helping the child build these skills, like this whole presentation. If they can build the self-regulation skills, um, they're gonna have that throughout their whole life. So it doesn't matter if there's something bothering them in high school or when they're an adult, their relationship, whatever it might be, they have the skills they can keep going back to that they learned in the time that we were together.
All right, Kyle, got another question. I have
Sure.
a family with two 8-year-old twin boys who both get blackout angry. How can a single parent regulate more than one child who, when angry, is capable of violence?
Ooh, very difficult. You're talking family therapy. If needed, definitely get the supports because it can be helpful. And this is just 1 hour, right? 50 minutes. Having someone like work with an adult like weekly is just so important. So going through, I guess processing through the whole process is like so important. So if I worked with a family like that, outside of the actual session is coaching sessions. So it'd be like, hey, well, how did you respond? Did you catch this earlier enough? That like little tips and tricks without like being in there, it's hard to tell, but it is possible. I mean, I worked with a single mom with 6 kids, and there's 2 sets of twins. It was wild. It took a while and a lot of service providers, like the extra support, because she just needed, of course, so much support. Single mom with 6 kids. Um, it is possible. I would say for that, having, really working on it, having a good plan and go from there. But having the support too, 'cause that it is hard to two twins, both blackout angry as you say. But highlighting, what will work for them and having coping skills for them is a place to start.
Thank you, Kyle. I have another question. I have
Sure.
a family with 3 children who have mandatory phone calls with their father. Children are 8, 12, 13. The calls are scheduled so they know when to expect them. The
Nice.
3 children fight and argue and are completely dysregulated before the calls. Any suggestions for this family to make the calls easier or to help the children before the calls?
Yes, definitely. That is the how to say it, the routines. Forget exactly how I worded it, but that was like the camp calm that I was using for that family. Reminds me of that situation. Um, Making it sort of I would label the time like the time before. You can, I'm sure you give them the best suggestion of, hey, use some coping skills before. I would do more with that. I would set the time. It could even be a timer or two. Say, let's like 15 minutes before the call. See what works with family if the kids need a split or they're going to do it together. But label that time. Like for us, it was camp calm. And everybody knew what that meant. So in a way, that was kind of limiting the language too, back to that one. Instead of explaining every time to the family, oh, before the call, you're gonna feel XYZ, you got to use coping skills. Instead of over explaining, it was just, hey, we need camp calm. We need to get into camp calm. So like labeling it, and then like having that routine each time, I think is gonna be helpful. And like really planning, this is the plan that we're gonna do during camp calm for us. It helped with them and it sounds similar.
Thank you. Kyle, suggestions for regulating a child not only who gets physical when upset, but also has severe ADHD diagnosis.
Oh, yep, common together. Like those two diagnoses are common together, or the ADHD, especially with ADHD children. Having a plan, having things ready is so important. Um, like if it sounds like just having like the coping skills, the fidgets, the journaling, having all that stuff ready because that's where the ADHD is. Like we're gonna forget where the stuff is. We're gonna forget what the plan is, and for the adult to be really clear and intentional with the prompts or directions is going to be really important for ADHD. If you give, so for that one, I said three max options. I would even reduce that to like two max. You don't want to overwhelm kids with ADHD with too many options because they just can't process. They're not able to do it. So like might even just be one prompt. All right, and one at a time too. Like what's the first step? Breaking it down step by step. So instead of um, we need to use a coping skill right now to get calm, it'd be one thing at a time. Um, let's go get your phone and headphones. First thing. All right, second thing. Let's put on that playlist that we made that you made from when you're angry. So breaking it down step by step. They'll get too overwhelmed if it's too many options or too big of a plan.
Thank you. How long does it typically take for a child to understand and regulate themselves? 1 year, 2 years? At what point does a parent figure out it's just not clicking?
Um, you gotta be, it depends on the age too, like what you expect, right? Big difference between a teenager, how quickly they can pick this up versus, a 6-year-old. Um, I would, it sounds like there's some frustration, for it not clicking. I'd break it down. There was a lot of information today. Break it down just by one part. Like, what are we going to learn? I would just start with the emotional identification. That's where I always start. Um, so that's going to be frustrating because if you say you do that work for, say, a couple weeks, it's not addressing the tantrums really. Um, it, it, it's just a part to get there. So it's the first step. So I'd break it down and make sure that you recognize the successes because for the client I was talking about, the kid that could only list one emotion every week. The progress was, all right, eventually he can list multiple in a week. That's progress. The tantrums were not coming down the first months. It took over a year for us. But just making sure you see the steps. Okay, now they used to know five emotions, now they know 20. They used to not be able to say I feel. I use I feel statements. Now they can use I feel statements. Maybe they can list coping skills, but they can't in the moment. They can't use them in the moment. So just being realistic and making sure you see the progress because it will stack eventually.
Kyle, quickly, we have two more questions. If we can fly through them, I know we're holding people a little bit over. Any
Got it.
suggestions to help a child who runs away when dysregulated?
Um, Yeah, that gets into the safety planning for sure. It just my experience, kids trying to run away is they're trying to take space. So reframing, you can take space, but where's that going to be? Is that going to be in the kitchen, the bedroom, bathroom? Um, yeah, sounds like they're trying to take space.
Last one. Suggestion for regulating a 23-month-old child that bites, kicks, slaps, and no social skills.
23-month-old. That is not my wheelhouse. I've not worked with a child that young. Youngest I've worked with is 6. Um, I would recommend though, uh, I did a training on FAN attunement. That is more for mothers with young children, and it's kind of some of this, but it's geared towards young children especially. The keyword's attunement, so you can look that up. There's programs for that.
All right. Thank you. Again, thank you all for coming. This was an awesome educational webinar. Lots of questions, lots of requests for the slides. I will get them out today. And for the recording, it will be posted probably by the end of the day on the Northeast Family Services YouTube channel. I will send a link in the email when I send the slides. Thank you all for coming. And next month we will be having another webinar. Look forward to sending out the emails. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.